guys, just I'm having you in mind, just have me in mind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Baruch na Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'fiu v'yamcha Beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzei amcha Beit Yisrael kolanu yodea shemecha v'limdei Toratecha lishma. Baruch atah Adonai melamed Torah l'amo Yisrael.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher b'chabal mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Amran notenu Torah. There's an extra special blessing that Hashem gives us clarity on this fourth session of the same day. Guys, let me just unpack everything for you. Basically, what this stuff comes to bring in the end of 5a4 is it said that if one of the damages were written, can we bring the other damages and convict on that based on the logical inference? And basically, Rav Zavid said in the name of Rava that you can't. You need two. And then Rav Mashar Shia said that sometimes you need more than two. And this is what it's coming to unpack. The whole reason that this argument came is in the Mishnah, it kept saying that there are differences between them. So how do we convict on things that are not necessarily mentioned? Because there are 4 in the Mishnah. There are 13 with Rav Ashaya, including in the Mishnah, and Rav Chia. There are 24, including those of the Mishnah, and Rav Ashaya took those from Rav Chia. And there are an additional 2. So what's this whole thing about? This whole thing is there are many cases that are not going to be mentioned in the Torah or the Talmud, and therefore we need a logical way to convict based on that. And why is one damager or damage, we're using a verb and a noun interchangeably here, because sometimes it's in the verb form, sometimes it's in the noun form. But the bottom line is something that causes damage to another, be it one's property or one's person. There are unique features in their leniency. So let me unpack this and give it to you. Okay? So on Keren, if you're accusing me of Keren, and Keren wasn't mentioned in the Torah, and I say, convict me on Shane alone, I'm going to just give it to you guys. I would say you can't convict me on Shane alone, because even though they're both oxes, you're mentioning Shane, in the Torah, it discusses physical gratification, which has nothing to do with the animal's intent to damage. They're not synonymous with each other. They're conceptually completely different. So you can't even bring it as a torda of Shane. You can't convict based on the concept, and the only other way you can convict is based on scriptural source. So if you bring Shane alone, which unique features physical gratification, I would turn around to you and say, you can't convict me for Keren because my ox intended to do damage to your ox. And you would say to me, for example, yes, but yours was worse because it's intentional. Your ox actually intended to do damage, and we see for Shane, which the animal didn't intend to do damage, that we have to pay. Then therefore you must pay on Keren because your animal intended to do damage. I would argue back that in fact it didn't intend to do damage from the outset, because the company that keeps on taking. So I would turn around and say to you guys that the problem, in fact, I'm going to turn off my business phones. Everybody can get knotted. Torah is more important. Is that my argument back would be, no, intention to damage isn't there necessarily from the outset, because my ox is tam for the first 3 sessions, which means I'm not responsible. In fact, maybe I don't even have to pay anything, never mind half damages, because you don't have any scriptural source. And furthermore, it doesn't even resemble your Shane. So based on that, guys, how would you convict me for Shane? You can't. You can't convict me because they're too dissimilar. Does that make sense?
Yeah. But you're just hypothetically saying that Keren there's no source for Keren in the Torah.
Yes, that's what the Daf is trying to say. The Daf has said from the beginning, why don't you only mention one damager? Why do you need to mention all of them? And it's obviously going on the premise that it's hypothetically not mentioned, because if it's mentioned, there's nothing to talk about. If it's mentioned, you pay it. The Torah doesn't even have to give a reason. You know that there's mishpatim, there's chukim, there's mitzvot. The Torah doesn't have to give a reason. If the Torah says something, sometimes we understand the mitzvahs and sometimes we don't. There's nothing to talk about. The reason why this daf came about is to say there's some things that are going to occur that are not going to be mentioned. So we need to be able to convict based on principles also, on common characteristics. In other words, if many damages share something in common, then that would be enough to convict, providing the uniqueness can cancel each other out. And I'm going to show you how to do this. I'm just unpacking everything for you. So all I'm saying is, guys, can you at least see that if you brought Shane alone to convict me on Keren, you won't be able to convict me on Keren because they're too dissimilar.
Okay.
Can you just see that?
I'm starting to understand.
Fine. Anybody have a problem with that? I will show you each example. You shouldn't have a problem with that. In other words, they're too dissimilar. They might be an ox. But in other words, it's like a person being accused of damage in one case and then automatically paying because he's a human on another. You can't just convict based on an animal because we know that damage can occur by a goat with horns or another creature with horns. So you can't just say, well, it's an ox, you have to pay. It's like saying it's a man. Man's guilty in all aspects. It's not. We're just talking about different creatures, whether it's your property or whether it's a person themselves. So I'm saying you can't convict on Keren based just on shame. They're too dissimilar.
Can I ask you another question? If it was for regal, you can't convict that either because it's also dissimilar, right?
Yes, we're going to go through each one now. Great question. So if I say on Shane, you're accusing me of Shane, and you want to attack me, for example, with Keren or regal. Okay, but before we do this, Arthur, we're going to attack Keren on every one of the other avot. Are you with me? All right, so guys, if you turn around and say regal, I've got evidence of regal, I can convict you on Keren. I could say to you, no, you can't. And you say, why? You could say, because you're accusing me, for example, of both with Shane and regal, that that I have to pay for damage. But this occurred in a public place. In your cases, we exempt in the public domain. So how do you know that you can convict me in the public domain? It's a very good argument. You would have to have a scriptural source to say that you can convict for Keren in the public domain. You get what I'm saying? Because the two exceptions of Shane and regal say that it's exempt in the public domain.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So I could say, I'm Keren, you don't have a source. Maybe yes, it damaged your ox in public. I'm exempt. It's a public domain. You can't say, no, it's not mentioned in the public. I say, but yours are. You see, it's tough. It's tough. And in any event, if you had to say, no, based on regal, I'd say, listen, yours, we learn that common damage to normal movement you have to pay for. And that makes sense because you've trampled on things according to the verse. You've trampled on the field of another or you've broken objects. My animal, how do you expect me to pay? It went mad. It attacked your animal. Your animal was provoking it. You're not going to be able to convict me on regal, guys, just based on regal alone. You're not going to be able to do it. You get what I'm saying? And then if you used, for example, certain times when you use two damages together, you can't necessarily convict. Why can't you necessarily convict? Because if you took Shane and regal together and you say, listen, we can prove that physical gratification is not a reason that we're convicting for Shane, because if I use regal in addition, common damage to a body, normal body movement, we have to pay. So therefore, we're proving physical gratification is not the unique feature of which we're convicting. And if you want to say with regal, the common damage through normal movement is not a reason for conviction, because on Shane with the physical gratification, that's why we convict. So it's not the unique feature of what we convicting on. And you take Shane and regal together, my argument could still be, yes, my ox damaged in the public domain and those two are exempt in the public domain. So I've got a counter argument, even if you bring those two.
But you're saying the unique differences.
Michael?
You're saying the unique differences are not the same and therefore...
No, I'm saying that the unique differences cancel each other out. If my argument to you against Keren is that Shane is a reason to convict based on the unique feature, the physical gratification. You could bring regel in that case and say, well, it's not on the unique feature that we're convicting, because on regel, we're convicting with the way the animal normally moves, which is common.
Well, when I say cancel each other out, I mean they're different. So therefore,
yes, the unique features. If you bring more than one, you can cancel out the unique feature if you can prove that it's not the unique feature based on what we do the conviction. Okay. Do you get it?
No, you're saying even though the leniencies are the same. Okay, for Shane and Regal, okay, it happened in a public domain. You can't use Shane and Regal as an argument for claiming damages because the unique features are different.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, even if the only reason I got out of it with Karen, if you're using Shane and Regal together, is because of the exemption in the public domain. Because I could say, listen, my ox damaged your ox in the public domain. That exempts in the case of Shane and Regal. There's no Torah mentioning of it with Karen, so therefore I'm exempt in the public domain, case closed. But if we didn't have that exception or that exemption in the public domain, you could convict on Karen, based not on Shane alone and not on Regal alone, because of the unique features are too different. They're too different. But if I can prove, this is what the whole daf's coming to prove. If I can prove that physical gratification is not the reason why I'm obligated, chayiv, because I can prove using Shane and Regal that in the case of Regal, common damage convicts, and if I bring with Regal Shane that physical gratification convicts, we then can prove with two of the damages that the unique feature isn't the reason why we convict. And therefore, it's the common feature that they both cause damage that we convict. And in that way, we've got Karen. We can actually convict Karen. The only reason we can't with Shane and Regal is because of the exemption in the public domain. That's why we're going to come to see that you need pit and one other damager. Because if you use a combination of other damages without pit, you can get out for different reasons. Okay? So let's take a case of Regal. If you want to convict, okay, Marco, I think you're not understanding. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
If you start off okay, then becomes more complicated. While you used a very simple example of Karen and Shane.
Yes, but I'm getting more complicated.
And then you started talking about, yeah.
I'm getting complicated for a reason, because I'm just bringing. I'm not complicating it. The dust complicates.
This is one concept, one example sorted out, and then let's add to that example. But don't
fine. Fine. So what I'm saying is, before we do according to what the Gemara is, and let me do another technique. Okay, let's just discuss the simple issues first. So what I'm saying is, the simple issue is that because of the unique features, any single damage you can never convict for with another damage. You can't use one damager to convict on another not mentioned in the Torah, because they're too dissimilar based on the unique feature. So we're going to go through each one. If you want to convict me for pit, for example, only pit, okay, and you're trying to use just fire alone, the unique feature is fire needs another force, and I could say, and it goes forth and damage. I could say, but listen, my pit didn't go forth and damage. You fell into it. You should have looked where you were going. So fire alone cannot be enough to convict for pit. Let's go through each one. If we go to Marvin,
that's fine. That's understandable. Okay, that we know.
Okay, so let's be doing it your way, Marco. No problem. Just give me a chop.
Okay.
So we are going to do it your way. It makes sense. Let's do it. Unpack it simply. So if you want to convict me with pit, with Marve, just Marve alone, I would say that, listen, man that damages man is responsible for 4 other additional damages. With pit, why am I responsible for the actual damage and 4 other damages? But you fell in the pit. You didn't look where you were going. This isn't a case of man damaging man. They're too dissimilar. If you want to say that man that damages a property is just, for example, obligated to one payment, and you want to use that as an analogous because with pit it's one's property, etc. Only when man damages man do you have actual damage, nezik damage, and 4 other damages. So let's say man, according to Shmuel, is shame, and you want to convict me on that. Then I would, where it's just the actual damage, I would say to you that Mave, according to Shmuel, is shame, which is the anatomy of the living. It doesn't resemble pit, which does not live. And the same thing if you bring Rav, that Mave is actually man. I would say, but hang on a second, pit is non-living. It's not analogous to something that's living. Okay? So you can't convict me on pit just based on Mave, on those 2 reasons, whether through Shmuel or Rav. But then you come to me with Regel, and you say, I'm going to convict you on pit just based on Regel. I can say, but listen, you can't convict me. This damage is very unusual. You didn't look where you were going. Regel, you're responsible because it's maybe the others haven't. Just give me a sec. The common damage is through the animal walking, and the Torah makes you obligated because you should be watching where your animal is walking and what it's trampling on. The pit is stationary. You came to trample on my field. What does my pit that you fell into and didn't look where you were going have to do with Regel? You can't convict me on Regel. If you look at Shane, you can say again, the animal moved to go and eat something, and while it consumed, it damaged. My pit's not in your way. Why didn't you look where you were going? It's stationary. You can't convict on Shane. Keren, the intention of your ox was to do damage. My property here, I didn't intend to do damage. I left something. Look at the Torndorf pit, for example. I left my knife in the walkway, okay? And somebody slipped on my knife. I didn't intend to damage. The reason why you can convict on Keren is the animal intended to damage. The animal's your property. If you want to say the pit is my property, I would say, according to Shmuel, you'd have a case because whether it's my property or not, I might be obligated to damage if it was in the Torah, but it was an accident. I left my knife there. Didn't intend to do it. And if you want to say, according to Rav, that it's not my property, listen, I don't accept ownership of the pit. It's not mine. I don't have possession of it. It's something that was left there. It's not my property. So if you take any single damager, you can't convict with pit. And the same thing with fire. The same thing with Mave, Regel, Shane, and Keren. You try and convict with any single of the damages with fire. Let's go through this very quickly. Okay? Try and convict me on pit with fire, guys. You can't. And the reason being is I'm going to say that, listen, there was a wind here. This is not my fault. The wind, I went to answer the phone and the wind blew it to your field and it damaged, and it's not my fault. There was a wind there because it needs another force. So pit doesn't need another force. You can't convict me on pit. The same thing with Mave. You can't convict fire just based on Mave alone. Why? Because man is a living. I'm hearing interference. Is somebody trying to ask me a question? I'm hearing a speaker. Okay, so what I was going to say is in Mave, it's living. So living has nothing to do with fire that's not living. You can't convict me on Mave. If you take a look at Regel, you can't convict me on fire with Regel because your ox, through its normal movement, damaged. This needed wind. It needed another force. The same thing with physical gratification. What is physical gratification got to do with the fire that went out of control? That two are not analogous. And intent to damage, if you want to say, I'm convicting you based on intent to damage of your property, I could say, that I lost one of the rooms in my house from the fire. Why would I cost myself 50,000 rands worth of damage, even if I wanted to burn you? So again, you can't convict with any single damager. Can you see that, guys? We're going to go through each one.
Yes.
Is this a handy way to do it? To unpack it?
Yeah, this is clear.
Yeah, this is much better, James.
I have to go.
All right. I was hoping you guys would get it. You were so smart. Michael, what did you say?
It's Kevin.
I have to go in a couple of minutes, huh?
Okay, you'll listen to the recording. It's no issue.
Yes. Okay.
All right, cool. So basically, if you take a look at Marvin, you want to convict me on Marvin. You can't convict me on Pitt. Why? Because Pitt, that is not living, how does that resemble man? In other words, if you want to convict me on Pitt, and you say I'm responsible for man, they're too dissimilar. It's the same with Rego, Shane, and Karen. Any single damager is too dissimilar to be able to convict based on a single damager. Can you see that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But, yeah, Marco?
Yeah, cool.
So what we're saying here is that we need 2 or more damages in order to convict. Because what's going to happen is that if you take 2 damages, the one damage is going to prove that the unique feature of the other damage is not the reason for the conviction. So you can't use that as a defense.
Yeah.
Meaning that if you want to obligate me for Rego, you would be able to, in certain cases, use 2 other damages because they cancel each other out. In other words, if you say that common damage does not resemble intent to damage, and that's the reason why you don't have to pay for Rego if it's not expressly mentioned in the Torah, is because intent to damage is too dissimilar to common damage to normal movement. But if you take intent to damage to normal movement and physical gratification, you can prove that it's neither intent to damage or kill the reason why you pay, nor physical gratification, because if you bring 2, they cancel each other out. You can see that physical gratification is not enough to convict, because then you just bring the case of Karen together and say, listen, the animal here intended to damage, and therefore physical gratification is not the reason for conviction. And then when you bring Shane, you say with Karen, it's not the physical gratification that's enough to convict. And on that basis, it's not dissimilar to Rego, whose common damage to normal movement, because you're not convicting based on the physical gratification. So while we have to bring 2 damages, is each of the unique features are knocked out, because if you prove that you're obligated to pay on 2 of the unique features, it's not the unique features that causes one to pay. It's the common feature of causing damage. Is that clear, guys?
Yes.
The last little part you said was clear, the rest was unclear.
Okay, just speak louder, Marco.
I said the last little thing you said was clear, but the whole example leading to that wasn't so clear.
Okay, so this is, so what I'm saying is...
You want the honest answer. I mean...
No, I do want the honest answer.
The whole explanation leading to the conclusion wasn't so clear, but I understand the conclusion.
Okay, so I'm gonna do it again, because this is exactly in the Gemara. So the physical gratification is a reason why you could get out of Rego, because I could say to you that Rego didn't resemble physical gratification. Okay, if because of the unique feature. And then what I could say on Karen, if you're trying to convict me on Rego, I could say my ox never intended to do damage. It was through the normal way that the animal moved. So when you take the concept of Karen and Shane in Rego, I can prove to you that it was neither the intent to damage nor the gratification is the reason you pay. Because Karen and Shane are so dissimilar that we can see it's not the unique feature upon which causes us to pay, but what they have in common is that your property did damage.
Yes.
And you can't do that with one damage alone, because the uniqueness is enough to get out of it. The same my damage didn't resemble your damage. But if you have two dissimilar damages that you have to pay on, you can look at the logic and say, well, it never convicted on the unique feature because Shane and Karen do not resemble each other in terms of the unique feature. Therefore, it cannot be the unique feature upon which we were convicted, but the fact that our property, ox, did damage. And therefore, on that, you can convict Regal. The reason why we need pit in all these cases, we've got 10 minutes left, is because you can get out of it two other ways, even based on the fact of you trying to convict and Regal on Karen and Shane. Okay, let me just finish. So what I'm saying is as follows. If you want to try to convict me on Karen, okay, then what I'm saying to you is I could say to you that my ox damaged in the public domain, and therefore, if you're trying to use Shane and Regal in unison, the thing that they have in common is they were exempt in the public domain. And because they were exempt in the public domain, you can't convict me on Karen because I could say my ox damaged your ox in the public domain. Because the feature they have in common is an exemption. So that's also posing a problem. The reason we bring pit is prone to damage from inception in the public domain. You're obligated in the public domain. So if you want to turn around and say, I'm not paying you for Karen because with Shane you're exempt in the public domain, I would turn around and say, but I'm bringing pit to prove that you're responsible for payment in the public domain. So it's not the unique feature of the public domain leniency at which you're going to get out of it, because on pit, you have to pay if it damages in a public domain.
Yeah, but how can you just use pit if the actual incident didn't happen in a pit?
No, you're using it, Michael, because if you want to show two dissimilar damages that prove it's not the unique feature upon which you're paying, it's the common feature upon which you're paying. But no, we need pit because if I say to you that you're accusing me of Karen and you bring Shane and Regal in as an example, and you can prove that it's not the unique feature upon which obligates me, either the physical gratification of Shane or the common damage to normal movement, and you say that they're both damaged, therefore you pay, I'm going to get out of it by using your leniency and saying exemption in the public domain they have in common, and therefore with Karen, it occurred in the public domain. You can't convict me. And why I'm mentioning that you have to have pit is with pit, you obligated in the public domain. So if I say to you with Regal and pit, and I use pit as one of the other examples, that's why you have to bring pit, is that it's Regal and pit. I can say that pit is prone to damage from inception, and Regal is common damage to normal movement. So it's not the unique feature of which we convict for Karen. It's the fact that they both cause damage, and you can't turn around and say, well, you exempt in the public domain, because I can say pit will come to prove that you're obligated in the public domain. So it's not the leniency which causes the exemption in your Karen case.
Yes. Okay, I understand. I understand the logic of how you get out of the one because of the common features, and you end up with pit because, it's not in the public domain. I understand all of that. But then I looked at it to myself and say, well, damn, what happened actually here in reality? What was the actual practical situation that occurred? Because if the animal didn't actually fall in a pit, what's the point of coming with arguments other than...
the reason why you bring two damages that are not mentioned is because you're coming to prove that it's the fact that your objects cause damage to another, and you can show that it's the common feature that obligates one to pay, and not the unique feature or the unique leniency that can make sure the person gets out of payment. So what you're doing is you're bringing an array of damages and say, look, all of these have one thing in common. They might have their own unique features, but each of these damages have one thing in common, is that it's all damage and you have to pay. That's why you bring in the other damages as your legal case.
Okay, Dave, can I? Do you mind if I just ask the rest of the group if they understand my question?
Sure.
Does anyone understand my problem here? Okay. My only problem with
I kind of do. I kind of get where you're coming from. you don't understand why Damon's throwing in pit when it regards an animal, because it seems like it's unrelated.
Yeah.
No, I'm throwing in pit. I'm throwing in pit for one reason. If you look at the Gemara here, look here, guys. Look at the screen. Rashi and Tosfot brings this. It's not me. Rashi and Tosfot brings this for one particular reason. Is that any combination of Shein, Regel, man, or fire, if you don't bring pit as one of the examples, you can't say that you're liable in the public domain, for example, or that it's a living creature, etc. So what I'm trying to say is as follows. It's the reason that you have to bring pit in all these cases with one other damager is otherwise you could claim exemption in the public domain. Pit comes to prove that you're obligated in the public domain.
Okay.
So if I'm bringing a case legally against you.
Yes, I can understand that.
Okay, so what's the issue?
I think I know what the problem is, James. He wants to understand the physical, a physical example of it.
Thing is not mentioned because that particular damage is not mentioned in the Torah. So what you do is you bring different damages that have things in common to prove it's not the uniqueness upon which you convict, and it's not the exemption where they get off the hook.
Okay, but let's take this example, Damon. Let's say it's Regel, and honestly, the ox was just damaged in the public domain. Now, all of a sudden, you're going to throw in pit, and this guy's going to be screwed now because of the fact that you're going to say that he's liable in the public domain because pit doesn't exempt you in the public domain. That's not fair to the guy whose ox was walking in the public domain.
And knocked over his table of goods he was selling. What's the hell pit got to do with it?
Correct. So, Gavin, you're bringing up a separate point that's going to be hit later in Daf 6, and say the reason why some of these unique features were mentioned is in order to be able to allow for the leniencies to exonerate. And that's why specifically some of these were mentioned. Exactly.
The problem with incorporating pit, I understand why you incorporate it sometimes, because you don't want the guy to get out of it when it's deliberately kind of his fault, and he's trying to evade and get out of it. But if he's honestly in a public domain and he's done nothing wrong and he's just walking through there, and then you're going to throw in pit in your legal case, he's finished, and it's unfair.
Yeah, but the reality is that's why the unique features are mentioned. That's specifically why, because to exonerate in cases where the Torah feels it's unfair. So that gets covered in the later daf. But what the daf wants you to do at this point is actually understand the mechanisms for conviction before it sees the methodologies for exoneration. And it's clearly here. It's not something I'm bringing. This is according to Rashi and Tosfot. So what I'm saying is before we look at those leniencies, Gavin, and you're 100% correct that it's not fair, that's why the Torah will come to bring it and say in these cases there are exemptions. We still need to have the skill set to be able to convict when somebody's trying to get out of it by showing that a person cannot get out of it, but just saying, well, your damage is unique compared to mine. If you have two different damages and you prove it's not the unique feature that caused them to pay, but the thing that they have in common that causes them to pay, you can convict on the third. And one of the reasons why pit has to be brought in every single case, in every case, is because pit has got two unique features, generally. If you want to convict me on Keren, I could say you exempt in the public domain if you bring Shein and Regel, because there's an exemption. And pit is coming to prove that you are obligated in the public domain. Same with Keren, Maveh, and fire. So you would need pit. You also need pit and one other one because pit is non-living. So if you want to bring living damages, I'll say my damage is not living. It doesn't resemble your damage. You get what I'm saying? So pit is the glue factor for that and any other damage. That's all I'm trying to say at this point of the daf.
Oh, I've got it.
Does that make sense?
Hopefully this will become more clear as we move on.
Can you send a recording of this if you don't mind? I'm sorry to ask again.
Yeah, with pleasure. But Marco, it's not that I'm being unclear. The daf is complicated and I'm following it to a T.
It's all right. We'll I'm gonna listen to the revision again, and I understand what you're saying. I just want to I want to appreciate. Yeah. Okay.